So I've had individuals they've stopped coming to church. They've changed their activities in terms of the routes they take to work. Sometimes they get rides with friends now instead of going on public transport. And there's actually an advertisement that goes around telling people to leave.
All right, guys, welcome back to the program. Today with me again, my friend and immigration lawyer, Vincent Chevanev Charles. He's back with us for a second round. You demanded it, and so we're back. And yeah, man, they loved it. And so I want to start from since we spoke in the last video. A lot of things have happened in America with immigration. Briefly, let me know what took place, and then we'll just go from there.
Okay, so there's been, I think what's been maintaining is the fear. So there is an understanding that if you go outside your house, ICE could be watching, that they could be there to pick you up, and the fear is there. Now I think one of the main things is the sharing of data between the IRS and ICE. That's been pressing, and I think it's going to affect a lot of people. There's also the registration requirement that came live, I believe, on Friday last.
Okay.
11th, thereabouts, it became a requirement for you to register. As well as on April the 9th, the DHS published an alert that says they're going to be checking using your social media in a different way than they did it before.
Before I get to the issue of the fare, because I think that's the last thing I want to talk about, I want to get with the issue of IRS sharing data with ICE.
Yeah.
How important is that in the scheme of things for Caribbean people?
Okay, so let's say you're from St. Vincent and you've been in the country for the last 20 odd years. You came in on a B2, but you overstayed. The common understanding that people have is that immigrants don't pay taxes. That's not actually true. You can get something called an individual tax ID number. And when you get that ITIN number, that allows you to return tax. You get some tax return back at the end of the year. Lawyers can then use that to establish something called good moral character. So when you are applying for an immigration benefit in the future, they can use that. So the IRS has spent a long time building the trust and encouraging immigrants to have the ITIN number and return taxes. But now they have now turned, and now they're now sharing that information with ICE. Now, before they still would have been able to share it, but that is normally in the instances of a serious criminal investigation. The majority of individuals were protected by privacy laws, but unfortunately, or depending on who you ask, the IRS is now looking at sharing that information. And I believe on April 7th, they have actually started doing that. So there's a memorandum of understanding between the IRS and ICE about cooperating for criminal investigations. Now that's important because a lot of immigration violations are considered criminal violations. So the idea is now, do you return taxes or not? Now, I would have to advise the individual, one-to-one, but they do have two things to be mindful of. If you don't return taxes, there are a lot of benefits that you could lose. So there are individuals who will not be able to access housing. There is, for the 60 plus individuals, there is the Metro card. There's a bunch of benefits you won't be able to access if you don't return taxes. Now, if you do return taxes, you can be targeted systematically by ICE, and they can encounter you on the road. They can target you headed to work, because now they know where you live, and they can schedule you to be picked up.
In terms of, you're going to advocate that they continue to return the taxes because, or are you saying maybe you shouldn't do it now because of, will a lawyer advise them not to do it, any lawyer at all, because it's easier now for ICE to?
So I would say return taxes, because it's the law. If you're working, you're meant to return taxes. I still would advise, in addition to that, that you see an immigration attorney to look at your situation to see if you are eligible for any immigration benefit that you may not
Right.
have previously thought about.
Okay.
Mhm.
Now, in terms of Caribbean nationals, last time we spoke, I believe you may have encountered a lot of them. What are some of their biggest fears right now coming to you? What are some of the biggest fears they're talking about?
I think the biggest fear is what to do if they encounter ICE.
Hmm.
Do they remain quiet or do they give their name? If ICE shows up and they normally target individuals. So
Right.
the amount of individuals who would just be on the bus and, oh, ICE is there, and they say, oh, who are you? That really doesn't. I haven't really heard that happening very much.
Mhm.
But what I would say is, if they come looking for you, they probably already have your name, your identity, etc. So it's just about being honest. Never claim to be a U.S. citizen to try to say, okay, I'm a U.S. citizen, leave me alone. No, if you claim to be a U.S. citizen, that is grounds for you to be detained, and they can actually fast track your deportation, dependent on your circumstance.
But right. So, have you encountered anyone so far that has been deported back to any island, and how have that experience been for them?
So yes, I have encountered individuals who have been deported back to Haiti, and they, in those circumstances, I have individuals who have self-deported.
Wow.
I had a lady call me. She said, "Chev, so scared right now. Already sent back maybe 4 or 5 barrels with my stuff, and I'm headed back home on Saturday." Um, Unfortunately, when you leave, you trigger a bar, so she won't be able to return back to the United States, probably for probably forever, because of one, her circumstances, and two, there's a 10-year bar, and by the time 10 years is up, she's going to be in her late 70s, probably early 80s.
Okay. Let's turn our attention now to the issue of the registration.
Yeah.
When you come in on a visa, you I understand now that once it's over 30 days, you have to register with the federal government. What
Right. So essentially, if you've been let's take it from flying from St. Vincent, right? So you get your B2 visa, etc., and you enter the country. Do you have to register at that point? No, you don't. You're already registered. You're already registered because once you've been issued an immigrant or non-immigrant visa, you've already registered. There's a very useful list that's on the USCIS website. So they would list people like LPR. If you have a green card holder, you don't need to register. You're already registered. If you've seen an immigration officer and they paroled you into the country, it's really targeting individuals who have not seen an immigration officer and have crossed the border illegally. So those individuals are really the ones they're targeting with this requirement. But the vast majority of people who are in the country once you entered legally are in fact registered already.
somebody coming from St. Lucia who has a U.S. visa that they obtained in Barbados or St. Vincent, whatever, they don't have to worry much about this sort of stuff. Then.
No, they don't. The reason because they have an I-94 and that's on the list. So the
Okay.
I-94 is a record of your entry. So once you have an I-94, you're okay. And you can find out if you have an I-94 on the state website. And if you just type in I-94 on Google, and you will see get most recent I-94. You can type in your name, your date of birth, your passport number, and it will come up on the screen.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. Let's go to the issue now of the fear that has been pervading that society since that time. Let's talk about that. What is it like?
So I've had individuals who've they've stopped coming to church. They've changed their activities in terms of the routes they take to work. Sometimes they get rides with friends now instead of going on public transport. And there's actually an advertisement that goes around telling people to leave because there's a CBP Home app that the government is encouraging people to use to self-deport. They're
Right.
promising you that if you self-deport, that in the future you may be able to return. Coincidentally, the advert also says to get out and stay out.
Wow.
And what it's doing, especially for the individuals who are on the older side of things, have a lot of experience in life, as you say.
Yeah.
They are the ones I find have the most fear, because what am I going to do when I go back home? So what I always encourage people to do is to have a plan. Okay, what is it going to look like if you're deported back to St. Vincent, if you're deported back to St. Lucia or Barbados? Do you have family you can stay with? What have you been doing for the past 25 years with, or do you have savings? Can you transfer those savings overseas? And it's important to prepare. So
Hmm.
see an immigration attorney. I offer free consultation. Once I hit Caribbean,
Yeah.
you have 20 minutes of my time. So it's what happens when you see an immigration attorney is that they're going to tell you, listen, this is what will happen if you're picked up by ICE. In the eventuality that they take you to court,
Hmm.
uh, if you have a final order of deportation against you, you really need to see an immigration attorney immediately. Okay, because you'll be accruing a fine on a daily basis. Now, if you are if you're worried about your immigration status, when you see an immigration attorney, that consultation is very important because you'll be able to ask all your questions, whether you've had a bad encounter with the police before, if you have a criminal record. Those are the things that I find uh, come up most in a consultation. I've heard some wild stories already. Okay, I find also green card holders
Hmm.
are also have a bit of fear because some of them do have criminal histories,
Hmm.
and those are the individuals that get targeted on their way out or on their way back in.
Oh,
Because they don't mind you leaving,
yeah,
okay, but when you come back, when you encounter a USIS officer, they will once they see something on your record,
they're
it's
gonna.
secondary inspection, and you may get detained and then put in removal proceedings, and you
Wow.
may actually stay in detention until you see a judge.
Yeah, but I'm glad you mentioned that the little wild stories because I was coming to that. I was going to ask you. You met with a lot of people from the Caribbean, different countries. I remember, a matter of fact, around the world, because everybody's looking for an immigration lawyer at this time. So, is there any horror story that stood out in your mind from anybody? I mean,
Horror stories, not really. I can't really go into specifics,
okay.
but I would say, in general terms, I
Hmm.
find individuals who've encountered the Federal Bureau of Investigation before,
Yeah.
FBI,
Hmm.
they're the ones that have the most fear,
Okay. Okay.
because, um, so let's say for an example
Hmm.
that you encountered the FBI in um, 20 years ago,
Yeah.
right? And it was a negative encounter, and you did
Okay.
something that you weren't supposed to do.
Right.
The feds, they keep extensive records, okay, and now everybody's sharing information. So if you have had such an encounter, whether it's the FBI or even the regular police, you need to see an immigration attorney. Those individuals, I feel, are especially sensitive to what ICE and the government are trying to do right now.
What advice are you going to give anyone who's planning to um, go to America, get a visa? The summer is coming up. Some people may want to go for a holiday in New York or Miami, wherever. What advice are you going to give to them at this point in time?
At this point in time, I would tell them to have a lot of evidence as to what you're going to do in the United States, who you're staying with, how much money you have in your account. Because the idea is right now is that they are also looking at your social media, right? So I'll get to that in a bit. But
Yes,
right
I'm
now,
forward to that.
for when you do the B2 application,
Hmm.
you're coming up for let's say 2 weeks.
Right.
You need to demonstrate that you're headed back home
Hmm.
and that while you're here, you're not going to cause any trouble, as well as you are going to be financially secure.
Let's turn our attention to the social media aspect of it now, because some people are saying that's a new thing, but from what I read, it's not a new thing, but maybe it's gone into a different, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
So it's I feel it's expanded. All
Hmm.
right. So on April the 9th, the DHS is issued an alert that says they're now going to check the social media for specifically anti-Semitic activity. So what that means, if you are endorsing, reposting, you are supporting the who they consider to be anti-terror and anti-Semitic terrorist organizations. The ones that are currently there right now are, among others, Hezbollah and Hamas. So if you feel that you have an opinion on what's happened over in Israel, I would suggest you not voice that on social media because that is what they're checking. If you are supporting the actions of Hamas, I implore you not to voice that opinion or have it at all. Okay, the response should be, I have no views on that. Okay, that's if you want to visit the United States, that is. Because what they are doing is they're basically stating, if you're coming here to study, you're coming here as a tourist, you basically have to be a guest. Okay, and when you're a guest, you don't insult, you don't interfere with the views and the perspective of the individual, the host country, which is the United States. But of course, there are some serious arguments going on right now about how that impacts freedom of speech.
Been some deportation students or some cases in the court currently as well. Have you come across anybody from the Caribbean who has gotten problems with that? Or
No, no, I haven't.
okay.
No one from the Caribbean that I can think of
Mhm.
at the minute. But I do know that once you are participating
Yeah.
in protests
Hmm.
in relation to the Israel slash Hamas
Right.
conflict,
Right.
then I believe you're on a list, because there are private individuals who actually go through the videos
Hmm.
and track you down. And then they send that as part of an ongoing list to the authorities, and then they will target you to have your visas revoked, your your student your service record will be terminated, and you basically will be due for deportation shortly. I would just say that immigration right now, it's a very hot topic, um, and when you ignore your immigration status, you may
Yeah.
find ICE at your front door.
Yeah.
Because what's happening now is, I feel they're building a list, and I don't think even if the administration changes,
They're good.
it's going to change the trajectory that they're currently on. Check the doctor early, as they say.
Yes, yes. All right. Thanks a lot for sharing the time with me today again. I'm going to leave a link in the description of this video as well, like I did the last time. So persons who
Okay,
may want to consult with you
all
and
right,
visit your website for more information. But
good
thanks a
stuff.
lot and stay safe as always, man.
Yes, I'm also on Instagram as well at Legal Lantern, so you can follow me there if you like.
All right. Thanks a lot for joining me today, man.
Appreciate the time.